Hey, everybody. Great to be with you today on PD and P-Dubs Unscripted here in the studio. And boy, it's been a long time since we've been together, PD.
Yeah, it has been a little bit, and we might have a name for the studio.
Yeah. We got a couple of
suggestions. So we're just narrowing it down, I would think.
We'll have to maybe put a vote out or something.
We could do that.
That would be fun. Yeah. So today is July 13th, Wednesday, and we're going in for a
deeper dive.
Deeper dive. Sounds like fun in the hot summer, you know.
Right.
Going to the pool or the lake for a deeper dive.
Right. And, right now, as we're, even though we're recording here in Emmanuel, here in Palatine, when this is airing, I will be down in nice and cool Houston, Texas.
Yes. Basking in the cool weather of the Houston humidity.
You're right. As we wrap up the National Youth Gathering on the 13th with our closing worship service. So be a lovely experience. And
absolutely.
Then kind of have a rest of the afternoon to check out some Houston attractions.
For sure. But before we get into our topic today, Pastor, what is today's podcast session? Who's it sponsored by?
That is a wonderful question, my friend. And I think today's podcast is sponsored by our puppet ministry, because they are beloved by people here at Emmanuel.
Well, I don't know if I'm so beloved. This is Izzy Mandelbaum coming at you through the radio waves.
Izzy, you know how to use a podcast?
What is a podcast anyway? Is it something that floats on the water, or is it something to do with fishing, like you cast your pod?
Yeah, it's something to do with what you fish with. I don't know, but this is Luigi joining in.
Oh, Luigi, look, oh boy, they'll let anybody into this studio.
Oh, yes, just have a key. You can get in here.
Well, I don't know if that's so nice to say. Oh, Mr. Mandelbaum, that wasn't the nicest thing to say.
Well, I don't know. I'm just all riled up again. I just can't stop getting riled up.
Izzy, your voice kind of changed there at the end.
Yeah, I thought it was too. Well, Luigi.
We can't.
It was good to see you, Luigi.
Sounds much higher, Stanley Steamer.
I don't know what to say.
Well, Chip Chitio. Jim Dandy trying to bring some order into this crazy conversation.
Yeah, it's a very crazy conversation going on right now.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I don't know. Things went south awful quick.
Oh, they did go off the rails pretty quickly there, Izzy.
Well, I don't know if they'll ever ask us to sponsor another podcast, whatever that is. Well, do you need a rod and reel or something?
I don't know, but we'll have you keep sponsoring, Izzy, because I know you got the big bucks there, the deep pockets that keep supporting this podcast.
Yeah, he's got the big bucks, that's for sure. Hey, Scuba Steve here. I'll tell you this right now, is the podcast has nothing to do with fishing, man.
And you would be the one to know about that, Scuba.
That's right. I've been on the waters all my life, I do a lot of fishing. There's no podcasting going on there.
But you could listen to a podcast out there fishing, maybe.
Well, of course you could. I think, speaking of, fishing and ponds and things like that, I think in jolly old England, they'd probably have some podcasts.
I bet they do, and while they have their tea and crumpets.
Why, the tea and crumpets, what a fancy thing to do.
I should have make you some tea and crumpets.
Well, Luigi, that would be wonderful. Anything that you make would be splashing.
As long as it's not my brother Mario.
Yeah, where's Mario at?
I don't know. He's off doing some adventure, maybe plumbing or something or other.
Oh, man, I tell you, it's a good thing because when you guys get in one room, you get all riled up too.
Oh, that's what we do. We don't get along always, but we love each other.
All right, well, we better get back to the show.
Yeah, ciao.
Arrivederci. You want me to read the Bible like this? And behold, a lawyer.
Well, I gotta get in my right voice.
Okay. Okay, so 3. So that was our sponsors as they kind of went a little off the rail today.
Wow, they're a bunch of characters, that's for sure.
I know. I don't know if we can have them back on this podcast.
Pastor, you had to usher Izzy Mandelbaum summarily out of the studio. He was just too rambunctious.
Yeah, he was getting a little riled up, and I didn't want anything destroyed down here.
Yeah, he gets a little riled up, that's for sure. So, well, today our reading is from Luke chapter 10, beginning at the 25th verse. It is the parable of the Good Samaritan. And so Pastor and I have decided that we're going to split this reading up. And Pastor, maybe I'll give it a go, and then I'll hand it off.
Where are you going to hand it off to?
I don't know. That's this is just like the Bears offense. You just got to be ready for anything.
Or the White Sox.
Well, I wasn't gonna go there, but
so you're saying I got to pay attention to
you
where
gotta pay attention.
It's like that popcorn reading.
And like if you stop, I gotta pay attention, and so we'll see how it goes.
Oh, maybe I'll just stop after one word.
Oh, all right. Now I laid down the challenge. All right, friends, grab out your Bibles, Luke chapter 10. Verse 25, and I think we're going to go all the way to 37.
Through 37, yep.
Through 37, yeah. And behold, a lawyer stood up to put him to the test, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He said to him, What is written in the law? How do you read it? And he answered, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, You have answered correctly. Do this, and you will live.
But he, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, And who is my neighbor? Jesus replied, A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, who stripped him and beat him, and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set on him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, Take care of him.
And whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back. Which of these 3 do you think proved to be neighbor of the man who fell among the robbers?
Ooh, he said, The one who showed him mercy. And Jesus said to him, You go and do likewise.
And this is the word of the Lord.
It's a little tricky doing it that way.
Well, hey, you stopped off right in the middle of a sentence. That's what threw me off.
Well, you're just lucky there's no big words in this one. I was going to stop at a big word and let you do all the big words.
I'm like, I think he's right there in the middle of the sentence, but I'm like, surely he wouldn't do that. So my eyes were going all around trying to find where the sentence ended with that.
Oh, yeah, I want to have some fun with that stopping right in the middle.
I tell you.
Kids these days.
I ought to send you to Houston.
Well, okay. I'll be going down there tomorrow.
Bang, zoom. Going to Houston. Alice.
Brady Bunch?
No. That was a good guess, though. It was the Honeymooners.
No, I've never seen the Honeymooners.
He's like, going to the moon, Alice. So
okay.
If you're in Houston, which you're going to see NASA.
Yeah, we're going to the Space Center.
They went to the moon, hence, the connection, going to Houston.
Okay, there you go.
Just follow along with my crazy mind.
Nice. Well done.
All right, so the parable of the Good Samaritan starts out with this lawyer who stood up and was trying to test Jesus into what has to be done to inherit eternal life. What shall I do is the focus of the question.
Which is like a loaded question because it's like, does he just want to know what is the bare minimum that I need to do in order to be saved?
Right.
Which I think a lot of people have that. Like, I just want to do maybe some students out there, they're like, what do I have to do just to get an easy grade? I don't want to have to try. I'll do whatever I have to just to pass the class. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I feel this lawyer's trying to do here.
Yeah, he's like, I know the law. And so how do I have to function? What do I have to do within the law to obtain eternal life? And, Jesus gives him something to do, but it's more gospel oriented than law oriented, right? Like love God and love people.
Right, in which Jesus is pretty much just summarizing the two tables of the Ten Commandments, where the first is all about protecting our relationship with God, our vertical relationship, and then Commandments 4 through 10 deal with that horizontal relationship with our neighbors and other people. And so he's saying, love God, that fixes the vertical relationship. Love others is the horizontal relationship. So bam, he just, succinctly describes the two tables of the Ten Commandments right there.
Yeah. And Jesus asked the lawyer, well, what does the law say? How do you read it? And then he gives him this answer. And Jesus confirms, oh, well, of course you answered correctly. Do this and you will live. And then, I kind of feel like there was this pause or got the lawyer thinking, because he has this follow-up question.
Right, who is my neighbor?
Yeah, desiring to justify himself. Well, who is my neighbor?
Right.
Because maybe he hasn't treated his neighbor the greatest.
Right, and and it's more than just what he thinks. And even that whole question, I feel that whole, what Jesus said in verse 27 there about love God with all your heart and all your soul and love your neighbor, as yourself. I feel that sometimes gets taken out of context in our society now when people are when there might be something where say, oh, well, that's a sinful act or something sinful. And we're like, well, doesn't Jesus say we should love everybody, love our neighbor? But the loving thing is to correct them in the midst of a sin.
Right. Give love does correct toward what God's expectations are, right? And but even he doesn't seem to be worried about the first part of loving God with all his heart, soul, mind, and strength. He questions about okay, how do I act toward people? And he must be, as it says, desiring to justify himself. I don't know that any of us could walk away and say, yes, I love the Lord with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength. And, we kind of hope that we do.
Right, we know that's what we're supposed to do.
And maybe we desire that, but do we achieve that?
No.
I don't think we do either.
Anytime that something is number one in our heart, we're not loving God with all our heart and all our might and all our soul.
Yeah, we're putting things in front of Him. And sometimes, frankly, maybe there's days or, periods of the day where we're not even got Him on our mind, and or maybe we go through stretches where we're not loving Him as we should. But then the loving your neighbor as yourself, I think all of us, if we're being honest, would really say, I don't do this all the time.
And I don't know if it's here on Gathering Place, we've kind of talked about how, in our communities and our neighborhoods, we don't see people out like we once did.
Right.
People pretty much go into the garage, go right into their house, and you don't see them.
Right.
And so I know there's more than just that, Jesus doesn't mean just those that live right next door to us, but if you just look in our own communities, when was the last time you heard of a street having a block party?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I was actually thinking about that the other day. I'm like, boy, I wonder, if our street has never had any such party. And I thought to myself, this crazy idea, would people come if, I just said, hey, come and I'll barbecue for everybody and we'll just have a party. And, there's a park in my backyard. It would be the perfect venue to just say, hey, neighbors, come on out. But then it's you begin to think, oh, well, first of all, would people come? 2, oh, do I want to spend all that money?
And do you buy enough food or not enough?
Yeah.
Or too much?
Exactly.
But I don't know. I bet it would be a rockin' party because I know those shilfs know how to party. And I bet that the whole neighborhood knows. So
yeah, I know. We keep people up late at night continually.
And I know you can cut a rug with the best of them.
Yeah, so it would seem. So yeah, I don't know if, but I've seen neighborhoods who've had block parties and things like that, and people seem to enjoy themselves. So they're getting to know their neighbor, right? And who was it? Greg Finke talked about how he would have parties with his neighbors, and they invited everybody over to his house. And as you get to meet people, you get to know who they are, and they got to know he was a pastor, but he wasn't there to proselytize or anything like that. But when push came to shove, one of the neighbors, I remember there was a story in his book, neighbor across the way, his wife was really sick, like deathly ill, and the husband came over and said, "Hey, could you come over and visit my wife?" And like, this is what you do, right? And so it opened a door.
Right. And I even think too what a fellow pastor in the area, Matt Hoffman, talks about in Park Ridge, where he has an inflatable pub.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And he just blows it up, and people know when the pub
People come over.
When the pub is up, you can come on in there, have a drink, have a conversation, and what a way to be a great neighbor.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, just provide some wonderful beverages and time to get together, and that's cool. Like the sign, the pub is up. Let's go over to their house. So. But yeah, even as we're talking about our neighbors in our neighborhood, right? And so like, who is my neighbor is what the lawyer wants to know, and ensues the whole story of the Good Samaritan.
Which he got more than what he wanted.
He sure did, didn't he? And like, he's a good Jewish lawyer, right?
Right.
And
I want to be by the book.
And he's probably pedigree, and because he's got an education. And he's going by the book because he can cite the law, chapter and verse, right there. Bang. Jesus asked him. He pulled it out. Bang. There it is. And so here Jesus tells him who his neighbor is. Well, it wasn't his next door neighbor.
It was a neighbor from a bordering country that people weren't too well liked from.
No, they thought poorly of Samaritans. And, when seemingly a Jewish man had fell down before robbers and, various other Jews who were priests or
the clergy type
clergy, Levite, they did not stop to help the man.
And they went that extra step by going across the street. Mm-hmm. And who knows, like, did they think he's dead? So it's like, we don't want to sully ourselves with the dirtiness and the uncleanness of the dead.
Yeah, they don't want to be unclean, so they'd be breaking the law of the Jewish law, right?
It just seems crazy. Like, you're just going to let the person die or be dead and not check on them?
Yeah. So here Jesus in verse 33, but a Samaritan as he journeyed came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. And so then the whole story, like he goes and helps him, but he goes over and above. He like takes care of his wounds. He pours oil and wine on him, which is costly.
Right, not cheap.
No, he binds up his wounds. He puts him on his own animal, takes him to the inn, give him a place to stay, and then pays up. He pays the innkeeper in advance and says, if there's more that needs to be owed, I'll be back.
Yeah, just let me know and I'll repay you.
I'll pay you. And so he goes over and above to help someone who is actually his
neighbor,
but in the eyes of the lawyer, it's his enemy.
Right.
So it's almost like love your enemies is in here. And but yeah, so your enemies are your neighbors.
That's not a fun one to live out.
No. Who would have compassion, number one, on their enemy? Two, who would have so much compassion on their enemy that they would go over and above in various ways to care for that enemy?
Right, like that's the kicker here. And especially when Jesus says, you go and do likewise. He doesn't say, that's who your neighbor is, but he's like, now this is what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, you ask what you want to do. You go do this. Show mercy on who you might think would be your enemy.
And I don't know, it doesn't really go into say what the lawyer does after this, but I picture him like the rich man that Jesus says you got to sell everything.
Yeah.
When he just kind of like feels like he does like puts his head down like the Charlie Brown walk.
Despondent.
And walks away. I feel this is what the lawyer is going to do here, even though we don't get that in the text.
Well, and if you think about like this is a command, you have to do this to inherit eternal life. If you set your mind like, okay, I will do this, you're not going to be in the right heart to do it. And here the Samaritan, he didn't think twice. It says that he had compassion. And there's a favorite word in there, the favorite Greek word.
Splatsana, I can't say.
Yeah, I guess. A lot of splots. Splagizomai or
Splagizomai.
Yeah.
Is it blue?
Blue Letter Bible. Let's see what they say, because we can hear it. But this fancy word that we're trying to say in Greek is for compassion, and it's the only compassion that's related to the compassion of Jesus, who does it out of pure love, unconditional love for someone else. So that's what drove the Samaritan to the action. It wasn't fulfilling the law so that he could go and say, "Oh, I did this, I will get eternal life." No, he was driven by love, which is what the lawyer quoted as, how do you read the law?
Okay. You ready for it?
Let's lay it on
Let's
us.
see if it works.
Strong's G 4697 splagnidzamai.
Splagnizamai.
Splagnizamai. Oh, I said splagidzamai. So splagnizamai.
Neither of us are Greek
No,
scholars.
we're not. No, let's just face it.
But yeah, it's always so. If you're ever curious what some Greek words are, go to blueletterbible.org, and it'll even tell you what it is in Strong's Concordance, because everybody loves Strong's Concordance.
I believe this is our Synod President, Reverend Dr. Matthew Harrison's favorite Greek word, too, because I've heard him say this. Splagnoxnamai or splagnigzamai.
Do I need to hit it again?
Yeah, let's hear it again.
Strong's G 4697 splagnidzamai.
Splagnizamai.
Oh, did you hear that? Splagnigzamai.
Got like some German in there or
Yeah, it was
something.
like guttural.
But yeah, so
Got
yeah.
something caught in my throat.
But yeah, President Harrison does like using this word, and it is a great word when you
is a
think about
great
that
word.
compassion of Jesus with him going to the cross. And here's what, and putting the needs of others before his own, which is exactly what the Good Samaritan's doing here by putting the needs of this person that's half dead on the side of the road, showing him that compassion and saving his life.
Yeah, he wasn't concerned about what the law said and like following it to the letter.
And getting if you got unclean by touching a dead body. He's like, this is what needs to be done, so I'm going to do it. And you think about that, it's one of those like ideas of like, this is what God's going to want me to do. I don't care if it's going to get me dirty or mess up my schedule or mess up. This is what I'm called to do, is show compassion, to love my neighbor.
Yep.
And it trumps everything else.
Yeah, and Luke doesn't say, well, the Samaritan walked up, rolled the guy over so he could see his face, identified that he was a Jew, and, no, he just walked up and helped the guy.
Right.
He was another human being in need.
Isn't that amazing? Putting aside all the differences that they might have had, not even thinking about that, just saying, this person's in need.
Right.
I'm going to care for them.
Right.
I don't care what the differences are.
Think of us in our times. If we found someone laying on the street, would we be ready to jump in? Right. Because when you jump in, you might be jumping in farther than you really wanted to.
Right.
And it seems that this Samaritan, out of love and compassion of Jesus, was willing to do more than first aid.
Right. And, not thinking, like, as you were talking about the just jumping in there, I was thinking of a somewhat newer SNL skit, probably 2016-ish or so. And I'm not a big fan of the new SNL, but there's one, I do like this skit, but it's Larry David, the creator of Seinfeld and Curb Your Enthusiasm. Mm-hmm. And he has an unstriking resemblance to Bernie Sanders.
Oh, yeah.
And so he was like playing Bernie Sanders in the skit, and it's kind of spoofing Curb Your Enthusiasm, where if you don't know, that is, well, even with Seinfeld, George is kind of based off Larry David's personality and who he is. Mm-hmm. And Curb kind of puts him in awkward situations where he's like, I don't want to do this. And so, it's Bernie doing his thing, trying to run for president. He's going somewhere, I forgot where. There's this lady that gets in a car accident, and she's like, oh, can you help me? Can you help me? And he goes over, he's like, I don't know if I want to help you, because if I move your seatbelt and you get hurt some other way, you could sue me.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to keep on walking.
Right.
And it's kind of what the other people are doing in here, where it's like, oh, this could get me dirty or unclean, or I could be affected negatively.
Right.
So I'm going to let you just suffer and be hurt. At the end of the skit, there's like, he loses the vote by like 5 people. And there's the 5 people that he kind of ignored throughout the day that didn't vote for him.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like our litigious society. When you spoke of that story, I worked in Rolling Meadows for a marketing company. I was in accounting, and there was the Pepsi delivery guy coming, and because this company would allow employees to have like free juices, free Pepsis, free Cokes. It was great. It was a great place to work. So we're in the lunchroom, and here comes the Pepsi guy. He's got his truck and a dolly filled with all sorts of cases of bottles and cans. And it was about as hot as last week, what was it, Monday or Tuesday, when it was like 105. It was Tuesday.
I thought it was later in the week.
Okay.
It was cooler earlier in the week at Shining Stars.
Oh, I meant.
Yeah, yesterday was really hot.
Yeah. So it was like 105. Well, this guy, he came out and he tripped, and he fell and hit his head, and all the bottles and everything flying all over the parking lot, and he's down on the ground, and we're all like, what in the world happened? So a couple of us ran out there, and he was still conscious, and we're like trying to help him out. And none of us were thinking anything other than, gosh, it's so hot out here. He's laying on this asphalt, which has to be 25 degrees hotter than 105. And so a few of us pick the guy up and walk him into, well, probably 15 paces into the lunchroom where there's air conditioning. And, we get him in a chair, and then we called 911, and they came, and I can't remember if they took him away or they just treated him there. I think he was fine. But after all that, someone came up to me and said, well, you shouldn't have moved him because he can sue you if something went wrong. Like, you don't know what happened to him.
Right.
And that was the first time I was like, oh, I didn't even think twice about what to do. I just wanted to help.
Right.
But then you start thinking, maybe there's a different way to help.
I can make this worse. Like we had that a couple months ago in church when we had one of our members fall coming up for communion.
Yeah.
And afterwards, we were both kind of like, well, maybe we shouldn't have done some of the things we did to pick her up and different things.
Yeah. Well, the difference there was her daughter was there helping us.
But still, it was one of those.
Right. And
your mind just goes, what do I need to do to help this person?
you're in action mode, right? And so, like, unfortunately, that's the way our society is. And it's not just litigious. The concern was also health-wise.
Right, you could have made it worse.
If he hurt his back, we could have made it worse. And so it was a lesson for me to, like, think a little slower on those moments. But here, the Samaritan doesn't. I mean, the person must have been pretty close to being dead, if two people are walking the other way.
Right.
And so he does more than first aid. He gets him a place to stay, and however long he needs to go. And he's going to come back and repay when I come back. And so as we look at this, Pastor, who does the Samaritan wind up sounding like?
Jesus.
Yeah, right.
He doesn't judge or be like, oh, you're Republican, you're Democratic, you're independent, whatever.
Yeah, you're this ethnicity, you're that ethnicity.
This gender.
Yeah.
He's like, I died for all.
Right.
And that's what we're supposed to do, have that same compassion for all people, no matter what their background is.
Yeah. So even Jesus was probably treated as badly or worse than a Samaritan by the Jews.
When you look at his arrest and the beating he took before he went to the cross and dying on a cross, none of that sounds really appealing to me.
Yeah. So thankfully, Jesus had that splagnigzomai.
Do I need it again?
Yeah.
Strong's G 4697. Splachnidzamai. Splachnidzamai.
Nizomai. That's what I got to remember.
Oh, what a great word that is.
It is. Everybody's going to listen and hear that one over in their head over and over and over.
And that guy's like tone of voice. He sounds almost angry.
Yeah. Strong's G.
Splogs is the my.
Well, he's probably got a lot of Strong's words to do, so he's probably done thousands of them. And he's like, all right, here we go again.
Or do they just keep replaying the strong and add the other things on top of that?
Right. So, which of these do you think proved to be the neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers? And the lawyer says the one who showed him mercy. He knew the answer.
Right.
Look at that.
Who would have thunk it?
Yeah. I love how Jesus does that when class is in session. People ask questions. He gets them to come up with the answers by asking them a question.
And then kind of puts them in that corner that he knows what they're going to have to answer. And he's like, boom, now go do that.
Yeah, you go and you do. Just the same. So, yeah, really familiar story, beloved story. Yeah, and I think I've shared with the Emmanuel people the one time at seminary where I found this lady, Alice, who kind of fell by the side of the road, and I was bringing my youngest son, Ben, home from school, and I'm like, this lady's like, there was no sidewalk, so she's kind of in the gravelly shoulder of the road, and I turned around, and I said, do you need her help? And she had a walker, and so we get her in the car. Well, where are you going? Well, I'm going to this church to pick up food. They have food for me. So I go there, and they're like, food for who? You know, I'm like, well, says her name's Alice. You got food for her. Well, thanks be to God. They're like, all right, we don't know who you're talking about, but here's some stuff. So I'm like, I walk back. Good Samaritan. Alice, I got all this stuff. And then she looks in the bag. No meat, no milk. And I'm like, I can't go back in there. So I'm like, all right, I live just across the street. I got milk. I got meat. So, all right, Alice, we're going to my house. So I run in, grab that. Here you go. And then she was satisfied. And then I took her home. And I remember walking up her stairwell of her apartment, opening the door, and there's like her adult sons in there. And I'm like, what? And they're like, oh, hey, how's it going? And they didn't even like help me bring the stuff in. So like that whole like you're trying to be a good Samaritan and you keep going and going and going the extra mile. And like it was like I think she said thank you, but then the door just kind of closed on us.
And you think you're just being taken advantage of.
Yeah, like I'm standing there with Ben, who was probably a third grader at the time. I'm like, that didn't end the way I thought it would end, but
at least it set a good example for your son.
I tried. You know,
And
for one day, I was loving my neighbor, right? So I like tried.
And that's what it's about. We can, we're just called to love our neighbor, show that compassion. If they don't respond in a way that we think is appropriate, so be it.
It's okay.
It's not what it's about.
Right. And that was the lesson that I learned is like, because I was, waiting for a response that I didn't get. And so we just kind of, okay, let's go home. And it's a story I'll never forget. But yeah, I gave you the short version. But I'll just never forget when she looked at the bag and goes, what? No meat or milk? And I'm like, okay, lady, I got you 2 grocery bags here of stuff.
She's not coming back to you for help
No
anymore.
way, man. So,
She's like, he is not a good Samaritan.
no, he's not. So good old Alice.
But
That's
yeah.
what I remember her name to be.
Good old Alice. That's a good spot to stop talking about Alice and the Good Samaritan, that you were being a good Samaritan. So yeah, we thank everybody for tuning in here today as we had this awesome discussion about the Good Samaritan, had some great advertisement and sponsors from our beloved puppets. So thank you for tuning in, and God's blessings.